Am I right? Speak. Maria Pappas, come on. Speak up.
Lawrence Benito,
Say what you're with, Lawrence.
the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights.
Susanna Kress from the Syrian Community Network.
Syrian.
Jack Lynch, gift hope organ transplant program.
Farima Samake, DACA recipient from West Africa, Mali.
Fatima Traore from West Africa, Mali, in a Malian community.
Daisy Funes, Center Romero, Barroso Salvadorian.
Bob Fioretti, a strong supporter of why we're here today.
Dorothy Brown, Clerk of the Circuit Court, also a supporter.
Bill Laurie, candidate, Cook County Commissioner, 3rd District, in support.
Zahir Sahlul, Syrian and Muslim American from Med Global.
Dr. Julianne Malveaux, President of Push Excel.
In Choi with the Hana Center, serving the Korean and immigrant communities.
Gloria Castillo from Chicago United.
Jeanette Wilson, Executive Director of Push for Excellence.
Grace Jisun Kim, a professor at Earlham School of Religion.
Reverend Martin Lee, a United Methodist Church pastor.
Mike Ferricks, Illinois State Treasurer.
Stacy Holman, producer, Firelight Films documentary.
Ali Alexander, President, Roosevelt University.
Pat Harris, Board Chair for Roosevelt University and Co-Chair of Push Excel.
In 1968, January 15th, we met in Dr. King's basement of his church. There was a darkness in our nation at that time because of abounding poverty in the Vietnam War. We shifted resources from the war on poverty to war in Vietnam. Much like today, the gap between, not so much between black and white, but the resource gap, not merely a race gap, and between the abounding wars today. Here comes Kwame Raoul. Come on, Kwame. We have this combination of persons who are here who are Korean and who are from South Central Latin America and from Africa. That was the range of our conversation that day. That morning around 8 o'clock, he had breakfast at home with his family. Around 10, he came to the church and convened a group of Americans, Appalachian whites, with whom we had not worked before, and some Latino Americans, some of Chavez group, farm workers, some Native Americans, some Jewish allies from New York, some Deep South blacks, of building a coalition to fight to end poverty, to establish a floor beneath which no one would fall, for affordable health care, education, and jobs that pay. We took a break, and around 2 o'clock we ended the session on how to end the war in Vietnam. He felt that we could not be isolated as a nation. They were in great peril. Perhaps the most dangerous man in America today is the president. Puts all of us at a real sense of threat. When you attack Africa, there are several. First of all, Africa is our security base. If Al-Qaeda and ISIS is let loose in Africa, what does it mean to us? In World War II, Roberts Field was the base for fighting the Germans. At that stage, Africa, every Firestone town, the highway comes from the plantation of Liberia. The gold from coffee from Ghana, uranium and the diamonds from the Congo. The great trade route with the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean's kiss to Cape of South Africa. 1/8 of the human race is African. Africa is the source of America's original wealth. 243 years of slavery, it made the shipping industry rich, and they helped to found Harvard and Princeton, Yale, and Columbia. 243 years of work without wages made the planters rich, and that what drove King Cotton, which was the industry of that time. And so to belittle Africans is immoral, but it's also a dangerous proposition. Haiti was our ally in the Revolutionary War. There's a monument dedicated to that in Savannah, Georgia, today. the first free African people in the world was Haiti. When all of Africa was under colonialism, and all American blacks were in slavery, and all of Latin America was under occupation, Haiti was the only free people of color in the whole world. And they got freed and ended up owing the Catholic Church and the French money for their freedom. Toussaint Louverture defeated Napoleon in Haiti. And so, and yet we must fight darkness with light and not with hate. I would say lastly, before I bring on a few people here, Dr. King was a man of big ideas. The big idea of ending poverty and ending war, big idea. If we could register 1 million people between now and April 4th, his assassination date, big idea. In Cook County Jail, there were 9,000 inmates a year ago. Now there are 6,000. 3,000 are out on monitored ankle bracelets. If while they're out, if the church will adopt those 3,000, will adopt them, and in fact, move them from job training, trade training, a job in transportation, it will end recidivism. Big idea. We, in fact, 2018 can take back the country. The good news is, to all of this, we have weapons we didn't have 50 years ago. We have the vote. Because of that, we won New Jersey this year, in spite of the harsh rhetoric. There's now a black lieutenant governor in New Jersey for the first time. We won Virginia, a deep South state, one of the Confederate capitals. We won every 5 votes with African American, and lieutenant governor is African American now. We won Alabama. One of every 3 votes was African American. The big Alabama-Georgia football game was in the deep South, where in spite of the work of Trump and Roy Moore, we beat them in Alabama. And even though Maddox got his reputation with his axe handle in Georgia, and while us blocking school doors, we're winning in spite of them. So we must fight darkness with light and keep our hope alive. I want to ask Dr. Lee and Dr. Kim to come briefly to talk a bit about what's happening in Korea, because we cannot be indifferent to Korea. In part because of our investment in the Korean conflict, because we helped to divide Korea into North and South in the first place. Also because if Trump and Kim Jong-un and North Korea are exchanging threats about nuclear weapons, it cannot be isolated. So we're mobilizing Korean Americans, the 2 million Korean Americans. Their numbers and their cause represent something big. This is the Rainbow Coalition. This is a multiracial, multicultural coalition fighting for global peace and global justice. In a brief word, Dr. Lee and Dr. Kim.
Good morning. My name is Martin Lee, Korean, and also United Methodist Church clergy person, working for Bishop Sally Dick. A couple of days ago, as you know, that North and South Korean high level of government officials met and talked about easing the tension between North and South. And also within 20 days, there will be a winter Olympic Games in Pyeongchang. And I pray that please pray for and support that this dialogue perhaps help to have another way to expanding dialogue between North Korea and the U.S. Thank you.
Dr. Grace.
I'm Grace Ji-Sun Kim. I teach at Earlham School of Religion. January 13 is Korean American Day, so we were celebrating Korean American Day. And so today on Martin Luther King Day, we remember how he wanted to break down walls and build bridges. And so I'm really excited to work with Reverend Jackson to build this Korean coalition to help kind of work towards reunification, that is a possibility, that the DMZ wall can come down and we can be unified. So it's exciting on this day that as we celebrate his birthday, that we can kind of work together and that it is a true Rainbow Push coalition. So thank you.
200,000 Salvadorians are threatened. Almost 1 million DACA youth, who are in fact Americans, are threatened. Justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, Dr. King argued. Therefore, we must in fact affirm the right of Salvadorians to stay in this country, and the DACA children to not be attached to a wall. In fact, to pull down the wall and build bridges. So I want the immigrant leadership to speak.
Thank you,
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lawrence Benito. I'm the CEO of the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights. Proud to stand here with Reverend Jackson and the Rainbow Push Coalition today. And we have with us also a diversity of our coalition of Korean leaders, Syrian leaders, Salvadoran, African, Muslim, refugee people that, as we're nearing the January 19th deadline in D.C., wanting to remind people, as Reverend Jackson said, there are 800,000 DACA recipients that are counting on members of Congress to get something done this week. And so we are organizing a rally and march on Wednesday, January 17th at 5 p.m. at Daley Plaza. Encourage people to attend. But each day that Congress delays, 122 DACA recipients lose their protections. Over 15,000 have already lost their protections since President Trump ended the DACA program on September 5th. So we cannot delay any further. We stand together with Rainbow Push to urge our members of Congress as they return this week. 800,000 DACA recipients are counting on them to get the job done, to push that families stay together, that they protect TPS, that they protect diversity visas. And we want a Clean Dream Act that does not punish families and add more border enforcement. Thank you.
One of our ablest Asian Americans from Haiti descent, the state senator in Illinois, now running for state attorney general, Kwame Raoul, will speak to us on the implications, the historical context of the attack on Haiti as a place of AIDS, not a place of development. Kwame.
Thank you, Reverend Jackson. I appreciate Dr. King as somebody who brings us together, and I appreciate Reverend Jackson as somebody who brings us together. I was initially insulted by Donald Trump, but sometimes our adversaries bring us together. It forces people to learn about the history of Haiti and its contributions to this country and to the Western Hemisphere at large. Started the Freedom Ball rolling in 1804. We celebrated Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, but January 1st, 1804 was a declaration of an independent Haiti, a country created as a result of a slave revolt. But prior to that, in 1779, over 500 soldiers fought for this country's independence. And so I invite Donald Trump to visit Savannah, where there's a monument commemorating the Haitian soldiers' contribution to the siege of Savannah. I invite Donald Trump to come to Chicago, to his own Trump Tower, which sits on DuSable Trail, commemorating the fact that it was a Haitian man that first settled in Chicago. I invite Donald Trump to the University of Chicago campus to visit the International House, where Frederick Douglass delivered an address 125 years ago declaring, until she spoke, no Christian nation had abolished slavery, in reference to Haiti. So learn your history, Mr. President.
Let me further suggest that our very special guest, Brother Brian Stevenson, is here today. Haiti freed because revolt in 1804, January 1st. African Americans, January 1st, 1863. No event more significant to us than the Emancipation Proclamation, the beginning of the end of slavery. And as horrendous as slavery was, it was not as violent as Jim Crow. At least in slavery, that we were considered to be property. We had been enslaved for 157 years when the Constitution was written, 160 plus years when the Constitution was written, and when the war ended. And so we were hemmed up and intimidated, but mostly lived to work. After we were freed and began to use our power of the vote, the unleashing of violence without protection may have been more horrendous than slavery in a very physical sense. And no scholar has dealt more deeply to that than Brian Stevenson. There may be up to 5,000 blacks lynched without an indictment. Many of them were soldiers. Some were women, a few were Jews, mostly blacks. Brian Stevenson, give us an introductory statement, then he'll be our keynote speaker today, and then we'll Q&A for the media. Brian?
Well, I'm just delighted to be here, and as Reverend Jackson just said, I do think we're at a moment in our nation's history where we're in the midst of an identity crisis. So many of the problems that we are dealing with because we do not understand where we have been. There is a narrative of racial difference in this country that we have yet to confront. It's like smog, and it compromises all of us, black, white, brown, everyone, and we see it manifest in these policies. And so we've got to talk about that, and I'm thrilled to be here with Reverend Jackson, to be here with Push, to be here with so many others, because we're determined to tell the story the way it hasn't been told, to set the record straight. We are a post-genocide society. We never dealt with the narrative, the genocide that we did to Native people when white settlers came to this continent. There are things you have to do when you're a post-genocide society, and we haven't done them. I do believe the great evil of American slavery was the ideology of white supremacy, the idea that black people aren't like white people. And we didn't end slavery in 1865 because we didn't talk about the legacy of this ideology of white supremacy. Slavery didn't end, it just evolved. We had 100 years of lynching where black people were pulled out of their homes, terrorized, hanged, beaten, brutalized, drowned. The black people in Chicago were in this city. And we don't talk about the fact that the black people in Chicago didn't come here as immigrants looking for new economic opportunities. They came here as refugees and exiles from terror. In Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, Louisiana, there are lines from Mississippi to Chicago, Alabama to Chicago. We need to understand what those lines represent. We fought this heroic struggle during the 1950s and 60s to end the legal disenfranchisement, but the narrative of racial difference persisted. And so today, we're dealing with people who literally want to turn back the clock. And we've got to not only not have the clock turn back, we still haven't gotten where we're trying to go. And so I am thrilled that there are people talking about these issues, pushing on these issues. It's not just Trump and the Republicans, it's all of these other institutions that are indifferent to the continuing challenge we face to rid ourselves of this menace. And that's in the history, and that's why I'm delighted to be next to Reverend Jackson, who has fought so hard. I want to invite everybody here. Next April, we're going to be opening something called the National Memorial for Peace and Justice. It will be a 6-acre site dedicated to thousands of African-American victims of racial terror lynchings. We've never acknowledged that history. 800 counties across this country had lynchings, and you can't tell me, no one in those counties can tell you where the lynchings took place because we haven't acknowledged them. The American South is littered with the iconography of the Confederacy, monuments and memorials everywhere, but we don't say a word about slavery, we don't say a word about lynching. And so that has to change. And so I invite you all to join us on April 26th when we open up the memorial, and we open up a museum called the Legacy Museum. Despite the centrality of that issue in our history, there aren't many places in this country where you can go and have an honest experience with the history of slavery and its legacy. That has to change if we're going to create a healthier America. Too many have fought for too long, including Reverend Jackson. For us to sit down now, we still need a community of people in this country that will stand when other people say sit down, who will speak when other people say be quiet. And I'm just glad we've got some models and leaders who have taught us how to do that. And my commitment is to carry that on with this great organization and with all of you who understand the importance of this moment and the need to keep fighting.
Thank you. Let me suggest you'll hear more from him today. But Brother Lowry, what makes Trump particularly dangerous, if an ordinary person walked up to you and said, you're inferior, I'm white, you're black, that person has a problem. If that person has power over you, you have a problem. If that person has the power to regulate and deregulate justice and to propose legislation, that's a problem for America. But now it's a problem. We've never had global race supremacy projected on the stage at the level we've known in the last century. And so I want to express my thanks to you, Brother Brian. May want to ask a question or two, and then we'll go on to our breakfast.
Reverend, Senator Scott and Perdue say, I believe, made varying statements after the incident, as I'll call it. They say they don't recall, I believe, that Donald Trump used that language. You've known Dick Durbin a long time. Who do you believe?
Dick Durbin and Senator Graham did not lie. Also, there's evidence today that the president was calling around bragging to his friends that he had done this act. But it's a pattern. It's not that day. It's challenging the birthplace of President Barack Obama. It's equating civil rights marches with neo-Nazis and KKK. It's glorifying the lynching, potential lynching of 5 young blacks in Central Park. It's a pattern of behavior. And it's 55 African nations taking a censorship position against America, therefore affecting. We have a trade surplus with Africa and a trade deficit with Asia, and so this kind of position is a threat to America, and it's a source of shame for America, and humiliation for people of color. Last one. Friends, we have to get to our breakfast now. To be reasonable on time. And one last question. Yes.
Do you believe he is a threat to America's global interests?
Oh yes. When you demean countries in our hemisphere, Africa, 1/8 of the human race. When you threaten to have a nuclear showdown with North Korea. When you threaten to withdraw support of NATO from the European allies, that is a threat to America like we've never known before. Friends, thank you. Let's get to the breakfast, please.
Reverend, one quick question. I stepped out to see if Governor Rauner would talk, which he wouldn't, by the way. But what would you like to see out of the White House to improve race relations in this country going forward?
There must be not just a conversation, but legislation. A renewed commitment to the Voting Rights Act. Jeff Sessions said the Voting Rights Act was an intrusion on states' rights. So the Attorney General is against the Voting Rights Act, and that's the crown jewel of our struggle. We didn't see an openness in conversation and legislation, and to stop deregulating justice. Thank you, friends.